All right, guys, what is up? Welcome in. GC Live. Wes here, Chris here, ready to talk some South Carolina recruiting for you. And, guys, what we're going to do today is we're going to go back over this run of just commit after commit after commit for the Gamecocks. And, Chris, I know you and Kev were on last week, kind of, I would say, in the middle of that run. But I do want to go back and hit on a couple of guys who were maybe just committed or just about to commit, and then just kind of break down each prospect that South Carolina has added during what is probably one of the most exciting recruiting runs of the Shane Beamer era. So most of today's show will be dedicated to some in-depth breakdowns of these prospects. But first, let's tell you about our guy Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. And as we always tell you, if you're in the market for a new home, if you think home ownership is in your future, or you're just really kind of curious of what home ownership might look like for you, how much do I need to save? What are the interest rates right now? What are the hidden fees I might not be thinking of? What would my monthly payment be, and what can I afford right now? Clint will sit down. He will go through all those things with you, talk you through it, answer your questions, probably even provide you some topics for questions you didn't even know. If home ownership is something you want in your future, all we ask is you give our guy Clint a chance to earn your business. ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797.
And if you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, or you think you may be here in the near future, we have a great option, a preferred partner for you on that too, and that's our friends at Ferry Chevrolet, Fairey, FerryChevrolet.com. That's where you can go to learn more, find out about their financing options. You can check out their new and used inventory. You can do it all online at FerryChevrolet.com. If you want to go by in person, if you're one of those guys, hey, I really like to go by in person, see things myself first, you can do that. They're convenient in Orangeburg, conveniently located between Columbia and Charleston. Well worth the trip out there. They're still led by a fourth-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry, and they've been around since 1926, 803-937-4531, or check out the new and used inventory for Chevy vehicles at FerryChevrolet.com.
Awesome, and certainly appreciate both of those awesome sponsors helping us out here to make this show possible. Chris, let's go back and hope everybody had a great 4th of July. Hope everybody's having a great summer. And right around the time everybody was getting ready for 4th of July, this run of South Carolina commitments took place. 4 commits in 4 days. Then South Carolina kicks off their 2028 recruiting class yesterday with a 4-star commitment as well. But July 1, Joshua Dobson, who we are still counting as an in-state recruit, even though he's at Huff High School, really got this thing kicked off, man. 5-star guy. And I know South Carolina has a lot of targets they would consider priority, a lot of targets that you would say, hey, they want this kid. They really do. I don't even know if schools like admit who the true top target is, right? Like, you never want to maybe upset anyone else. But I will say this. I don't know. We'll put it like this. There was not a target that was a bigger priority than Josh Dobson for South Carolina in this class. And it was a little bit of a marathon recruitment. I'm kind of curious, man, and I still don't – I think there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. Either, and it kind of depends even who you ask, either South Carolina won out a marathon recruitment where at some points LSU was out front. Shoot, man, I think you can go back before that, like the early stages. I think people were putting some pieces together thinking, hey, Clemson might be really strong here. Tennessee might be really strong here. Then, you know, I think there was a little bit of Notre Dame buzz. Then as it goes along, there was a ton of buzz about LSU at one point. Then the A&M buzz. Then finally it's, well, don't count out Michigan. They have a lot to offer that he likes. And ultimately, South Carolina, it felt like was maybe the other school, like in the top 2 or 3, as those additional schools we just talked about kind of rotated through and then rotated out. So either they waited and kind of just bided their time and won it out in the end, or there's kind of a theory out there of, was South Carolina quietly the pick, quietly the favorite, certainly quietly one of the favorites throughout this entire thing and was just completely okay with flying under the radar.
Yeah, there's been some recruits over the years for South Carolina, and there's been recruits in the Beamer era where the Gamecocks do fly under the radar, and the staff's generally fine with that, right? Like we can think back to Dylan Stewart, right? Like most people knew, all right, South Carolina's in his lead group. He had talked about South Carolina being in his lead group. At the end of the day, a lot of people maybe who aren't on the ground in Columbia or following it super close might go, oh, well, he'll just go to, Ohio State or Tennessee or wherever it may be. And they kind of count the Gamecocks out, right? Like same thing happened. I mean, Jordan Birch was getting recruited. People are, he'll end up at Georgia. He'll go to Clemson, something like that. Nick Carver. With Dobson, you kind of got that same sense, right? Where even though this was really still as an in-state recruit for much of the process was an in-state recruit in reality, not just, technically, people kind of looked at this and said, oh, he's got every school in the country after him. Here comes A&M. Here comes Michigan. He'll probably pick one of those. Meanwhile, South Carolina has been working this recruitment since Josh was, I guess, a freshman in high school. They've built great relationships. They've had stability on the defensive side of the ball. They put together a great plan, had a great relationship with the family. And it kind of, at the end of the day, however you want to classify it, when I say circle back, it's circle back to South Carolina. And that's actually, Wes, a theme, I think, with a few of the prospects that they picked up from the 2027 class, kind of had a similar feel where South Carolina's kind of always been there. You're never going to win 4 and 5 star recruitments just uncontested. There's always going to be competition. There's usually going to be ebbs and flows to those recruitments, and there certainly were with all of, 3 of them from last week. There certainly were with Josh Dobson. There were some points, I can say from us following it pretty closely, Wes, where you and I are talking behind the scenes and we're like, yeah, I mean, you feel pretty good about it. Sometimes you're sitting there going, whew, I don't know. Another school might rise up and actually get him. For South Carolina, I think the key was they got it to that final visit. That was a key that they had to get. They had to make sure this recruitment extended to that last official visit. Josh Dobson put that there for a reason. He gave the Gamecocks the last bite at the apple, the last at bat, however you want to say it. And I don't think it was a situation where whoever got that last visit was going to get him. I'm not painting that picture. There are some recruitments might actually be that way. But I think for South Carolina, getting an official visit that ended, 8 days or so, about a week before he committed, gave them a chance to reinforce a lot of the things that he liked about South Carolina. They were able to answer some key questions. Jeremiah Donati being involved, able to answer some questions on Shane Beamer's stability and future with the program. And obviously he got the answers that he was satisfied with on that front.
Yeah, I think there were several factors that played a major role in this, man. One, Torian Gray, the relationship there, but really, too, I think just the development track record, the resume for Torian Gray, a big factor. The job Darren Usher did, I think both in terms of putting together the plan and in just personally recruiting him, kind of having maybe a little extra involvement there from that position and making sure all those questions were answered. I think, glad you mentioned Jeremiah Donati, just being kind of an open book and letting Dobson and his family ask him questions and being willing to address things head on. The relationship with Beamer, the fact South Carolina addressed the rumors of, the hot seat pretty much straight up, head on, not saying, hey, we're just going to put your head in the sand and say, none of that stuff is true. It sounds like it was more along the lines of, hey, we know what's out there. You know what's out there. We plan to win this year. And, we think in the long term, you're going to be a major part of helping us win in the future. So I think all that played a major role here as South Carolina ultimately won out. And, South Carolina was competitive here in the NIL space too. Like that's part of the game. That's part of the pie. If you're going to look at all the things that are going to go into why a prospect chooses a school. If you're on the video version, you can see his highlights rolling right now. Chris, let's dive into who Josh Dobson is, the football player. I think it's interesting. When I look at a 5-star prospect, a 5-star to me is the guy that has the least number of sort of question marks as a prospect. So there's never been a perfect prospect, but who can check as many boxes as possible. And it has to sort of include that athletic upside, right? Like the upside in the On3 in the rivals world. When you talk a 5-star, you're really truly projecting out future first round NFL draft pick. Like that's kind of what it means. 32 5-stars, 32 picks in the first round. So that kind of is what it is, man. But the guy who can make you say, not only do we think this kid has the upside to deliver that, but there are as few as possible worries along the way that might keep this prospect from meeting that massive potential.
Yeah, and I think with a 5-star too, man, you hit on this. The athleticism absolutely has to be there, right? You have to have,
Elite.
elite. You have to have that's I was trying to come up with a word. That's probably the best one. It has to be elite. And if you look at guys who are ranked 5-stars, there are levels to them. Not every, when you talk about having the least number of question marks, I think the one thing that can make you a 5-star, even if you do have some question marks, is just having this unbelievable physical ability, right? So if you look at Nick Harbor, Nick had some questions coming out in terms of, well, what is his position? Can he develop into a receiver? And he has, and I think he's going to have his best year yet. But Nick's physical tools are, even for a 5-star, unbelievable. It's not good enough to, there's kind of this misnomer. This is something we hear a lot. If there's just a really, really good prospect, a really, really good football player, something we hear a lot is, well, that guy should be a 5-star. Well, you can be not just good, you can be a great football player and not be a 5-star, right? If you're a second-round NFL draft pick, you're a great football player. It might not make you a 5-star, though. The 5-star guys are in that upper echelon, that 1% probably of just mix of all the traits. And typically they're going to have that elite athletic ability. So bring this back to Josh Dobson. Yeah, he's a great kid. He's a really good football player. He's got work ethic, he checks all those boxes. But when you look at him as an athlete, specifically as a DB, he's got length, size, he's got long speed, something that, I talked to Chachi Sullivan, his defensive coordinator and position coach at Huff High, where he'll play this season, for a piece on Gamecock Central. And the thing he pointed out was, hey, Josh has really good short area quickness. He can change direction very quick. And he said, hey, a lot of guys who are his size, they're tall, lengthy, they can run, but they can't change direction as fast. And so that's kind of a differentiator for Josh. His quote was, if he sees something and can plant his foot, you're in a lot of trouble, because he can go in the run game and find something and chase it down, changing direction. You're going to be facing off against elite receivers in the SEC who are also big, fast, can run, have great ball skills. And so you have to be able not just to be able to run, but as a DB, sometimes you're going to get burnt. Can you change direction and recover? And his ability to do that in short and long spurts, I think, really makes him stand out. Then you go to Torian Gray's track record, right? Torian Gray has a great track record, not only with guys kind of similar to Josh's caliber. He's got 5-stars on his resume. He also has more developmental guys on the resume. Torian Gray's proven he can take guys that have tools and help them elevate their game and take it to the next level. And so that's what's so exciting about Josh under Torian Gray. He's already really good, but you start thinking about how much better he could get and the elite physical tools he has to get there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, man, we look at these T. Gray recruits and we talk about upside, and not that most of them probably quite have the upside that Josh Dobson possesses. I think his is elite. You can have really, really good upside and still not be to the level that Josh is. But I think with a lot of those guys, we were talking about maybe raw football players, but great athletes. And you're just kind of saying, look, T. Gray can develop them. And they kind of have a type, right? Like they fit into this scheme. They fit into the way South Carolina wants to use their cornerbacks. And maybe you don't quite have to have that elite change of direction that we're talking about with Dobson. So I think the difference is with him is he's going to be a step twitchier. He's going to be a step just more athletic. While also, I think a lot of times in recruiting, you talk ceiling, which is what we're talking about right now. How high can this thing go? And then you talk about the floor, and maybe some of these other T. Gray recruits, even some of the ones that have developed and turned out very, very good football players, maybe that floor was not that high in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? So there was some risk there. I think with Josh Dobson, you not only have that high ceiling, the thing that would set him apart for me as a 5-star is that you have that high floor. Even if he was not getting better, which seems very far-fetched, he's already at this point such a good football player that I feel like you feel comfortable with him coming in and making a pretty quick impact and being able to get on the field and helping you be a better football team. So to me, that's another just sort of eliminating the potential negative, like checking all the boxes. A guy who is kind of raw, if they don't grow and develop a ton as a football player, then they're probably not going to help you. If for whatever weird reason Dobson just never improved as much as you would project, he's still a heck of a football player, and that stands out to me, man. But hey, you mentioned Chachi. I think that's another advantage here, dude. The fact that you are going to have an entire season, and this is no shade, no offense to everybody at Catawba Ridge. Like, they obviously did a great job getting Josh to this point in his career. He's a national recruit. He's a superstar. But having a year with Chachi, who has worked with guys like J.C. Horn, Izzy Mukwamu, Darius Rush, just to name a few, I think that's going to work wonders for this kid, getting him ready for the next step under T. Gray.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Chachi had some thoughts on him, and another guy we'll talk about shortly too, who will be coaching this year. But he had high praise for him, and the thing about talking to Chachi is he's coached a lot of big time players, and when you talk to him, he'll always give you the real. You never walk away from a Chachi conversation like he's blowing smoke about that guy. He will give you exactly what he thinks about this guy, things to work on, where they are. He's very even keel with it, and he's been very impressed with just what he's seen from Josh so far, like what he knows about him. He's been really impressed with it, just trying to work to get better every day, never satisfied. Like, this is a guy who has offers from everybody. You sometimes see, Wes, when guys kind of get to that peak, they kind of maybe not shut it down, but they coast a little bit. And this is not a kid who's interested in coasting. He's trying to get better at all times. And so that's another reason I think you feel good. You've got the elite physical skills. You've got the want to on the part of the kid, and you have a guy that he's going to be working with in Torian Gray, who has a proven track record of developing. And that's what makes him, an exciting prospect for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I want to add to that too. Shout out to his parents. Shout out to Renard Dobson and Stacy Dobson for the job they've done with that kid. Like, I think some of that, just some of that you're talking about, the fact that he's not sort of just gotten complacent with everything, probably goes back to the way he was raised and the way he is being pushed, by his parents. So just a great prospect on and off the field all the way around. And Chris, I think an attention grabber for the Gamecocks. Like, this is a kid, like, I'm not saying this run of recruits in a weird way. All four of these commitments we're talking about actually kind of did take place in a vacuum to an extent. Now, I know Davion Jones, who we're about to talk about, he is a teammate of Josh. I think it probably, those two even have been quoted as talking about how they discussed, hey, you want to go to South Carolina together? Well, those were two recruitments though that played out separately. Like it worked out this way, but it's kind of funny how it was a domino effect. But Davion made his own decision. Nate Carson made his own decision. So that being said, I think this helps you. We're already seeing South Carolina in that sort of York County plus Charlotte type area up there, the state of North Carolina, maybe having a little bit of buzz for the 2028 class. So how much does getting someone like Josh Dobson, who the whole country wanted, just help your overall maybe perception of your program? Another guy that I think, Chris, is a heck of a football player is Davion Jones, also a transfer into Huff. We're going to go to the film here in a second. Gamecocks beat out LSU. A little bit of a back and forth at the end. Looked like Lane Kiffin and those boys were about to win this one. South Carolina fires back. They get him on the commit list. And, Chris, here's the thing about Davion. He does not match the typical T. Gray special in terms of the height. You know what that tells me? He was too good of a football player for them to say no to. Like if you're not 6 foot, if you're not 6'1", if Torian Gray wants you, that means you're too good of a football player for him to turn down. And I think, dude, we're gonna pop on the film here in a second. Very impressive film for Davion Jones, who is one of those guys who just makes plays all over the football field, as J.C. Sherbert pointed out in his piece on him. And, man, you bring in Josh Dobson types and Davion Jones types in your secondary, you're well on your way to continuing the recent success South Carolina has had in those position groups.
Yeah, you're right. Not a guy that's even 6 foot tall. So doesn't fit that prototypical Torian Gray mold, but we've seen him go outside of that a little bit. Jalewis Solomon, who has not put it together yet at South Carolina, but was certainly a really good high school football player. Can he put it together? We'll see. He was another guy that kind of fit that, hey, just really good football player. DQ Smith, not an elite size and athleticism guy. Didn't even play DB in high school. Had not played DB since like 8th grade. Torian Gray looked at him. I like this guy as a football player. So you better have some traits that Torian Gray really likes. And Davion has that in spades. He's, first of all, the thing you see, he with the ball in his hands, he's dangerous. If he gets a pick, he's factored in the return game. As you just saw in that clip, if you're watching the video stream, he's a physical football player. He's got really good instincts. He can also really run. This is a kid that's, I think, 10.7 in the 100 meters. So he's got speed. He's got those instincts, and he's very aggressive. And he's versatile enough to play anywhere. We know Torian Gray likes versatile dudes. We always play the game. Not always, but a lot of times the prospects, where will Torian actually play this guy? And sometimes it's not where we may think just watching a guy on film. Gamecocks think that Davion Jones could play anywhere, safety, nickel, corner. I'm very intrigued by him as a nickel, actually. Maybe that's where he ends up. But, man, he's a really good football player, but he's also one of those guys that's a really good high school football player and has traits that can translate to the college level, namely his speed, I think.
All right, let's play the game, man. Where are you playing this kid? Because, as you said, I think that was part of the recruitment here. That was part of the value for Davion in South Carolina was corner, nickel, safety, whichever one you can help us at first, that's where we will play you at. Like, if you can show you can help at corner, boom, we're going to play you. If you show you can contribute at nickel, that's where you're going to play. So multiple opportunities to get off on the field. And, man, I tell you what pops out to me. I'm more thinking safety maybe, man. But here's what I want to see in my safeties. and I saw it in that very first clip. At the high school level, if I put my eyes on you, the phrase that I want to think of is heat seeking missile. You know that play in high school football where you have like a stud DB and it's almost like he's moving at a different level than everybody else on the field, and he comes flying in and just eats up about 15 yards of grass and has no regard for human life, his own or anyone else's, and just hammers the ball carrier. That to me is the type of guy Davion Jones is. So I don't know, man. I might like him kind of in the middle, just roaming around, just smacking people coming down into the box from that safety spot.
Yeah, and one reason I'm so intrigued by nickel is uh, he's going to play more there for Huff this year. And if you watch his film, he is back there at safety. And this is something you see a lot at the high school level. To your point about high school ball, if you've got a DB, even if he's really good in coverage, sometimes defensive coordinators in high school say, we're putting that guy at safety because he's going to be able to cover the most ground, make the most plays for us. He's going to be playing more nickel this season for Huff. And so that maybe that'll give us a better idea, may give South Carolina a better idea, as they watch him progress through his senior year. But he's got the physical tools to be able to match up and take away good receivers while also playing the run. We all know if you play nickel for South Carolina, you've got to be able to play the run. And we've seen some of the bigger guys that have played that spot for them in the past. So, yeah, while South Carolina thinks he can play anywhere, I love the idea of nickel or safety. I think he could frankly thrive at either of them, but I am very interested to see him playing nickel, specifically like for coverage, right? What does he look like in coverage? You see some of that on film. You see a lot of clips of him hitting dudes on film, which you love to see. So maybe we'll have a better idea, but I'd be good with either of them based on the traits here.
Yeah, and a lot of him on this film just kind of playing that center field role, whether it's sniffing out crossers or playing deep ball, just basically literally center field. Hey, go get the ball. I think I don't know, man. Like this kid's just a player, and you know what might be a factor here too, Chris. We are going to get a little, I think, view of South Carolina on the field this year. Depending on who wins that nickel job, they may have a little bit smaller nickel back this year if it is Quashid Scott. So does that work out? Is that fine? Are they like, okay, we're okay with this? Or after this year, are they sitting there going, no, we kind of liked it when we had a bit, a little bit bigger guy like a Kilgore in there. So I think that could be something maybe to keep an eye on there as well in terms of not just Davion's season, but South Carolina's season as well. So, but yeah, dude, great pickup. This is some great film. This is just a ball player, and fascinating that it's South Carolina and LSU that was fighting it out, right? Like two of your, what would you say, the last 20, 25, maybe even beyond that years, like two of your better DB producing programs in the entire country. You can almost always look in a South Carolina secondary or an LSU secondary, and there's ballers, man. So if you're battling those guys, I think that's a pretty good sign here.
Yeah, definitely a big pickup. And I mean, you look at the two recruitments we've already talked about. These are the type guys that you want to be signing, and when you get into these big boy recruitments, you're obviously not going to sign everybody. Nobody does. Even the programs that are in the top 5, top 10 in high school recruiting every single year, they're not getting all of them, right? But they're getting a high volume of players like this. And so, I mean, look at Davion's finalist list: LSU, Georgia, Indiana, which still is a little bit weird to say, but they've been pretty solid, Wes, over the past couple of years. They were on the list. So you've got a list of finalists that are, you're in the right company there if you can land a guy like this.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit of Jamie Robinson to this film, man. What do you think of that comp?
Yeah, I can see that.
A little bit. All right, dude. Hey, that's the first two guys. We're going to get into Nate Carson here in a second. We're at the halfway point of the show. And seems like a great time, man, to tell everybody about our friends at AtScope.
Let's tell them about them. ATSKO, atsco.com. That's where you need to go for all of your outdoor hunting, fishing products. If you're an outdoorsman, you're definitely going to want to check out their products at atsco.com. Zero brand UV control, odor control, specialized laundry detergents, and a variety of outdoor gear. They also have specialized products to help take care of your pets, plus skin protection, odor control, shampoos, sun protection, products for sensitive skin, and waterproof footwear, clothing, and again, a variety of outdoor gear. You may say, man, that sounds like a lot. It is a lot. You can go check it out at atsco.com, ATSKO.com. If you're an outdoors person, it's a must check out. That's atsco.com.
And once again, going to welcome somebody we started telling you about a couple weeks ago, Chris. That's our friends at Zen AI. They're introducing vibecasting, which is a new way to podcast. And you may be hearing AI. You're like, what does that have to do with my podcasting? Well, so essentially, the human, you are the talent. The AI aspect of this is just the infrastructure, the producer. The heart of Zen AI is that as an AI producer that will handle the edit from audio cleanup to the creation of share-ready clips for you. You can even collaborate with your AI producer conversationally, make audio and video edits just by chatting in plain English. So it's quick. You hit record, you have a conversation, a draft of your sportscast is ready, and then it can be shared around the world. Shout out to our friends at Zen AI. Go to zen.ai to sign up now, or head into our show notes here on YouTube or wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. You're going to have a direct link there to our friends at Zen AI. So, again, it's the home of vibecasting, a new way to capture and share your conversations as a podcaster.
And we're going to tell you, lastly, about our friends at Rytech Electric. They're one of our
new graphic, Chris.
Yeah, brand new graphics. So, Wes, if you need an electrician, you're here in the Midlands, I got a recommendation for you. Rytech Electric. It's where you need to go. Check them out. They serve the Midlands, Columbia, Lexington, and surrounding areas. That's Rytech Electric, RYTEC, rytechelectric.com, or 803-303-8274, operated by our guy Steven over there. They do an outstanding job. They do things a little bit differently than some other companies. They're locally owned, founded back in 2007, 4.9 stars from over 400 Google reviews. They do residential and commercial electric work. Every electrician on their team is a direct Rytech employee, so no subcontractors. A lot of times, home service businesses, you get them to come out, okay, quote you the job, you say, let's go, and then they're sending people out to your house, and you're like, who the heck is this? That will not happen with Rytech. They're going to have direct employees for Rytech come out to do the work. They tell you the price before they touch a single wire. Every repair is backed with a 1-year parts and labor guarantee. So if you got flickering lights, dead outlets, tripping breakers, panel upgrades, whatever it is, give them a call. It's 803-303-8274. A real person will pick up for you. That's Rytech Electric.
All right, man, let's dive into the other commitments. Next up for South Carolina, we had July 1, we had July 2, July 3rd, our guy Nate Carson from Chris's neck of the woods in Irmo, South Carolina, 4-star offensive lineman, picking the Gamecocks in the end over, what was it, Chris? Georgia, Clemson, Colorado officially. Yep. Man, you got to mention Tennessee too. They weren't in the final group, but Tennessee was in this thing for the longest. I would say for a hefty portion of this sort of recruitment, I kind of thought Tennessee might be South Carolina's biggest competition here, even though, and we've talked about this for those who listen to the other shows, there was kind of that ebb and flow of, well, he visited Georgia. Georgia was the public leader. Visited Clemson. Clemson was the public leader. I think we were on that one, to just be completely frank. Like, we'll tell people if we were off, and like, hey, this was a surprise. It felt like a recruitment that was a play the long game recruitment. Hang in there. Let's see what happens at the end. I will not call out the one poster who every time we talked about Nate Carson possibly going to South Carolina told me we were wrong. Not going to call him out by name. But the Gamecocks get it done. They get Nate Carson on the commit list. And, man, that was 3 blue chippers in 3 days at that point. and keeping the top offensive lineman in the state of South Carolina, the top offensive lineman in the Midlands at home. And this is another upside kid, man. Like, I think you look at offensive linemen, there's a lot of guys who can play guard. There's a lot of guys who can play center that you can go get. But there are far fewer guys who can play out there on the perimeter of the O line. I think Rivals, are we still even? Yeah, we're still listing him on the interior. But dude, I look at the frame. I look at this highlight, which we're going to play here in a moment. I mean, I'm not saying he's definitely 100% always going to be a tackle, but I think there is tackle athleticism. There's tackle length. There are definitely some tackle just qualities to Nate Carson as a prospect.
Oh, and South Carolina also believes he can play tackle. And I think we're kind of getting a sense following recruiting and what Randy Clements and Jason Smith and Sam Survey are doing on the offensive line. And yeah, they're still bringing in guys where sometimes you check, okay, where does South Carolina see this guy? And sometimes you hear, hey, he might can play guard or tackle. He can be interior or tackle. Carson, I think they feel this a similar way, but they kind of seem to have him on the board more as a tackle. And I think when you watch his film, or if you see Nate Carson in person, you can tell why. Going up here against, at one time, Michigan commit, but now Gamecock freshman Julian Walker. And that is, he's got the athleticism and the ability to move his feet enough to be able to play tackle in the SEC, to play it at a high level against pass rushers. You're going to be going against guys who are going to be first round picks, NFL draft picks. You see how quickly he can get out of his stance there. He can move. He can get out in the run game. Like he's got plus movement ability for a guy his size. He's got a really good frame. He can get bigger. He can get stronger, more refined technically. But you start with the size to athleticism ratio, and he's got that. He also, I think, you watch him on film, he's not one of those guys that only relies on his size. He's someone who likes to go play to the whistle. And that's something I always like to see out of high school offensive linemen. There are a lot of guys at the high school level who are just big enough to bully, lesser talent. But what makes them translate to the college level, can they move? Are they willing to get better, put in the work? Do they do things like this where you're blocking guys to the whistle? And Nate Carson does that on film too. But I think you start with just the athletic traits, and he's got a lot of those.
Yeah, and just the willingness to get downfield too, the ability to get downfield, that maybe starts to creep into the conversation too, man. When you talk about a Kendall Briles offense, and obviously South Carolina and those guys hope that it's very successful, and Kendall and this scheme is here for a long time. You got to have some agility, just some ability to get on the line quickly and not get worn down and stuff like that to play this spot in this scheme. So I think that's a fit there. To your point, man, I like that there's a mean streak on the field, because when you talk to Nate off the field, he smiles, he's joking, great personality, just the type of kid you enjoy interviewing, gives you good in-depth answers, and, kind of tells you what's on his mind. And so basically is someone who I think when you look at who he is off the field, it feels like he's one of those guys who can like flip the switch, when we enter the lines basically. So I think you got to have both those things right if you are going to play O line, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, no doubt. And great personality off the field. Probably one of our, I think we're on the same page. Guy that we really like talking to and getting to know over the past few years. And Wes, to go back to the recruitment just a little bit here, it has some similarities to Dobson and Davion in that, Carolina was, I think, Nate Carson's first offer. Like maybe not even first Power Four. Like I think they were the first school to offer him. And offered him, Travian Robertson actually extended the offer as the area recruiter. He's a guy that early on was thought of as, hey, maybe this is a D lineman, maybe this is an O lineman, and obviously developed into more where everybody's recruiting him as an offensive lineman. But the Gamecocks are in very early here, and you always kind of got the sense, hey, this is one that it seems like it has South Carolina written all over it, but you knew a prospect to that caliber is going to keep getting offers. He enjoyed the recruiting process. He took a lot of visits. And you mentioned earlier, quite frankly, a lot of times he would go and visit a school and they would make an impression. And he's thinking a lot about that school when he left that visit. Another one to where I think it was very important that South Carolina got the last at bat here. He was in on that same weekend as Dobson and Davion Jones. South Carolina had a lot of success with the guys they brought in that weekend who were uncommitted. They only didn't get one of them, MJ Evans, who went to Auburn. And so they're able to go grab him and kind of have things circle back to South Carolina, which was really always the constant, I think, in this recruitment. There are a lot of schools that, rose to the top or were a co-leader with the Gamecocks. At the end of the day, they were the most stable in this recruitment.
Well, and remember early on, man, I feel like there was some, I don't know if it was buzz to the extent of like, this is where he was headed, but I remember Ohio State being a school that Nate seemed to be very, very intrigued by. And you were kind of going, does he want to go that far? But I mean, it's Ohio State. Like, they recruit as well as anybody in the country. So this was a kid who had a bunch of really high quality offers. And ultimately, you want to do everything you can to keep these guys at home. And, kudos to all those guys. Sam Sorbet was kind of the long-term relationship here. But, we talked to Nate after his South Carolina official visit, Chris. Lots of love for Jay Smooth and for Randy Clements as well, even though they kind of came in towards the latter part of his recruitment because of the change at O-line coach. So, I think that was a big part of that was just him hitting it off with those guys too. As Austin says here, not saying he's as big of a freak as Shakarius Peak yet, but he does kind of fit that athlete, twitchy, 6'4", 6'5" type mold that we're seeing maybe South Carolina target at this point, as opposed to like the 6'7", 6'8", Corey Robinson type guys at the tackle spot. So, I'm curious to see how Nate fits in long term. I see why Charles and those guys have him as an interior guy, but I really think he's someone, as I said in the open, who has a chance long term to remain at tackle for South Carolina. And as you saw in the film, there is playing left tackle at Irmo and just kind of holding down the blind side there. Let's keep it rolling, Chris. Jaden Brody. Have we confirmed if it's Brody or more like Brody for Jaden?
I've been saying Brody. Didn't even think about it maybe being Brody.
Yeah, we will. Jaden, I don't know if you're watching or listening, but we'll confirm that with you, man. If we're getting it wrong, we apologize. But regardless, I'll say this: we don't have to apologize for this, Chris. This dude was an absolute warrior at South Carolina's O-line, D-line camp. I remember you were standing over there. I was in the indoor watching some sevens. I came out and you said, hey, you got to watch this. I guess you probably said, Brody, you got to watch this Brody kid. He is whipping everybody in front of him, winning all these one-on-ones. And we even heard a little buzz for some, just listing O-line, D-line. There was some buzz like, hey, we should offer this guy. And sure enough, he gets the offer. And, man, South Carolina kind of made quick work for all the different recruitments we've talked about that involved months, years, multiple years. This is one where, you kind of wondered, all right, they offer him. Does he wait it out? Does he wait to the season? That was even discussed at one point. But it seems like Carolina kind of aggressively said, no, we've seen enough. We like this guy. Let's not only offer him, but let's go ahead and push and try to get him added to this commit list. And Chris, I'm curious because you got more of a look at him than I did. What were the maybe qualities you saw seeing him up close at that O-line, D-line camp, which, by the way, I can't remember which day it was, but chances are it was one of those days where it was also about 98.8 degrees out there, but he was still just competing his tail off.
No doubt about that. It was definitely hot. We talked a lot about traits. And so when you look at Jaden, he's not 6'5", 245. This is a guy that has more of kind of that Brian Thomas Jr. build. I've told this story all the time. Brian Thomas Jr. got his offer from Carolina, and I didn't even realize this until he told me years later. He was 195 pounds, at that time. And we saw he developed into a legitimate SEC football player, pass rusher. What Jaden has is what he lacks for in that, prototypical size. He's just a good football player, and he has, I think, natural pass rush ability. And so we're watching there in the one-on-ones, and the offensive line coaches, Randy Clements, Jason Smith, they say, nope, go again. Give me somebody else. Give me somebody with more length. Give me this, give me that. And Jaden just beat all of them. I think he won 4 or 5 reps in a row. This is a guy that I think Kevin Miller made this point last week. Sometimes with these guys that don't have that great length, they actually play the run pretty well too. They play with good leverage. They can get under offensive tackles' pads. But what stands out about him is just the natural pass rushing ability, the motor. I think all that was on display in camp. And Carolina doesn't want to be done at the edge position in this class, but this was a guy that they signed off on and really liked, or actually loved, I would say, his camp performance.
Yeah, and I think in a perfect world, man, you can maybe pair him up with one of these guys they're going to keep recruiting. I continue to circle Fred Ards there as maybe being a combination of being someone they like really, really want, and also one where we hear just enough, right, of that he could be open to that. And I think when you talk about potentially teaming those guys up, Jaden with Fred Ards, and then of course you're always gonna maybe hit the portal at that spot too. Long term, you're talking about obviously Julian Walker. By the time these two guys get on campus, will be a second-year player who, in theory, will have played a decent amount this year. Anthony Addison having another year under his belt. But Chris, the post Dylan Stewart at South Carolina era is not that far ahead. It's after this season, so I think important to start to fill that position group out with some different guys who you think can help you. And Carolina, this was kind of a do your due diligence type commitment. Got him on campus, worked him really hard, and he responded, and they got him committed, as we said. So good, 3-star guy. I think that's probably fair, to be honest, in terms of, like you said, the measurables and the qualities he brings, but a good commitment for South Carolina nonetheless. And capped off some 4th of July fireworks in that 4-for-4 stretch that South Carolina had, getting him committed to the Gamecocks, and kind of closed out the summer, you would say, in terms of 2027 recruiting. As now, you almost get the sense it's like a reassessment time. Where are things at overall? What are the remaining needs? And for Carolina, I'm sure continuing to look ahead and recruit some of those guys that may be committed elsewhere, who we believe will have their eyes on South Carolina's regular season, have their eyes on the future of the program, and really probably just want to see some wins. But Chris, as we're going to talk about here in a moment, that kind of set the stage, kind of set the table for South Carolina picking up their first 2028 commitment, which took place earlier this week, coming through for the Gamecocks on Wednesday.
Yep, and to back up 2027 real quick before we get into it, you got 17 commitments now. So now you're being really choosy. A lot of the guys left on the board, as you said, are flip candidates. And so for the Gamecocks, you keep recruiting the guys in your class, you go after some flip candidates, but you're really turning the page a little bit to 2028. And they've obviously been working on that class for a while. You saw a lot of these guys in camp. And one of them was Joseph Jet Gibbs, who was the first 2028 commitment for South Carolina. Wes, I also remember, I love that we get to cover these camps and that we go because it gives great context into the future. This guy shows up. We're like, who was that guy? First of all, he looks the part. You just see a receiver who's 6'2", legitimate size. Then you start watching him run around. Then you start watching him in one-on-ones, and you're like, all right, that guy checks the boxes. Then you learn, how well he tested in terms of his 40 time and all the measurables that they do before they get going with the drills and the one-on-ones and all that stuff. All that checked the box, and South Carolina offered him. Frankly, Wes, didn't think at that time, hey, we didn't think at the time, hey, this is a guy that's going to be committed to the Gamecocks in the matter of a couple or a few weeks. But that's how it's played out. They jumped in on him very early. I think this is a guy who, and probably will, frankly, probably will not be his last batch of offers. This will probably just jumpstart that recruitment. But they offered him early, really liked him, and he decided to jump in. And man, I think what you see here is a guy that the trait, we've spent a lot of time talking about traits. This guy can really, really run. He's got, I think I looked it up. What did I say? 10.5 speed in the 100. Mm-hmm. So he's got size and can really run.
Yeah, and so this is one of those Charles Power thing, man, but there's verifiable speed here. When you look at what he's done on the track, he had some great times, some great numbers in Columbia for their camp that you were just referring to, but that was just him backing up, honestly, just sort of reaffirming everything he did at the Under Armour camp in Charlotte. I guess that would have been maybe a month or two prior. And those numbers, man, and they're going to put you on the laser there. 4.33 40-yard dash, 4.31 shuttle, 35-inch vertical, and a 10.55 broad jump. So, and this is for a kid who still has not 1 but 2 years left of high school ball. So those are off the chart numbers. Right now is the number 297 overall prospect in that class of 2028 is right on the line there as a 4-star. Kind of a low 4-star right now, but someone, if he continues to develop as a football player, is going to easily be a 4-star, I think, based just on those physical qualities that we're talking about. And, Chris, I have seen some reaction. I've seen some buzz of, well, early commitment. Can South Carolina hang on to him? And, man, I'll be honest. I think we're at the point, let's acknowledge it. And today's recruiting world, and it is very much okay, in my opinion, to acknowledge, there's 2 full years of high school ball left with this kid. It is a long way to signing day. You do have to recruit these early commitments as if they are uncommitted, right? But would you rather be chasing, or would you rather have that guy on your commit list, that guy coming around your campus, that guy checking out your games as a commitment, getting to know other players who might be wanting to go to South Carolina as well, giving you yet another commitment in the state of North Carolina, a place that we've seen South Carolina start to break into the last few cycles. I think you take all those advantages over just the worry of, hey, could this be too early? Could a guy decommit down the road? Everybody knows that's a possibility in today's college football world, just in general. But the kid seems very excited about South Carolina, very excited about Mike Furry, very excited about Shane Beamer. And quite frankly, it's just too good to turn down at this point, and gives you a really nice start to that 2028 class. Just a freak, speedy athlete here, man.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think you can't really get upset about losing guys in the recruiting process that you might have a chance to go grab later, and then also get upset about landing a guy because he may decommit at some point, right? And that's the fan experience, right? It's up and down. Yes, it's very early. Maybe some people look at this and say, well, I'd rather him go through the entire process and then make one commitment and stick with it. But that's just kind of not the reality, of where modern era college football recruiting is. And, hopefully you can keep this guy in the class. It is early. I'm sure he'll get more offers because everybody else is going to see what we're all seeing here, and that this guy's got really good film. He's got that legitimate, as you said, verifiable speed. He did some camps this summer. Clemson only has one receiver offer out for the 2028 class. It's to Braylon Clark, who South Carolina also wants, but they really like this kid. He had a really good performance at UNC. but he's still a little bit, yeah, he's a 4-star, but this is still a guy that I think programs are still kind of learning about in some ways. He doesn't have that, even though he's a 4-star, doesn't have that huge national profile, but I think a really, really good pickup. And for South Carolina, it was a situation where you're trusting your eyes. You know, if you have a guy this size with that speed and he ran it in your camp and he's got those verified track times and you see the film, then, you know, trust your eyes, offer him, and it's paid off here.
Yeah, and Chris, I will add this, and we're about to close it out here. We're going to talk about one more guy. But first, I'll say this, man. Not that anybody else out there is Nick Harbor in terms of like, you know, the 6'5" and the 10'1" and all that stuff. But if I'm a taller, speedier, just kind of high velocity wide receiver who is wanting to develop my actual skill set as a wide receiver, look no further than what Mike Furrey has done with Nick Harbor to this point, right? You know, like outsiders can talk about the process of, you know, Harbor and why he didn't do as much early in his career. All that, anybody who was paying attention knows that the amount of progress Harbor has made is actually pretty incredible. And I think that is a testament to Nick himself. Let's not just kind of skip over that. You know, Nick has worked his tail off, but having an NFL wide receiver, a former NFL, wide receiver coach developing you every step of the way has done wonders for Nick too. So I think if I'm a speedster who's maybe a little bit raw as a wide receiver, I'm looking no further than Furrey to help me develop my game and get to that next level. And the thing I like about this kid too is I think, unlike, you know, a few of these slot receivers South Carolina has added, he is another like true outside wide receiver who can play the X or play the Z and go out there and make some plays for you. So speaking, Chris, of wide receivers, potentially the next guy to hop on board by the time you are hearing this later on, if you're listening on the podcast version, he may already be on board. That is Jamari Kane, class of 2028, 3-star wide receiver, committing here tonight, Thursday at about 6:30, I think. Could be South Carolina, could be Kentucky, could be Virginia Tech, but Gamecocks are thought to be, we'll say, projected to be on our end in pretty good shape here. Chris, another trust your eyes, another guy South Carolina got to see up close and personal. His teammate, Avion Lewis, and the rest of his team, Huguenot, were at South Carolina 7-on-7. You and I literally stood there as Furrey watched these guys competing last month, and Jamari Kane leaves Columbia with an offer in his hand, and we'll see if he rewards that with a commitment to South Carolina later tonight.
Yeah, and this is a guy that, you know, is maybe might fit that bill of more of that slot type receiver, Wes. You know, I thought he was good at South Carolina's camp. They're loaded with talent, Huguenot. You know, they had another young receiver that we found out about. They were like, who is that guy? You know, somebody in the 2029 class. And so, you know, once we put eyes on Kane, liked him, you know, he's listed at 6'1". To me, he looks like maybe more of a slot type guy. He's got good film, plays at a really good high school program alongside Avion Lewis. Their quarterback, Charles Scott, is committed to Alabama in the 2028 class. So they've got a lot of talent on that team. And, you know, again, to go back, I think you mentioned it too, the trust your eyes thing. This is someone that South Carolina got to see in camp. They got to see in the 7-on-7 setting. Furrey watched him closely, really, really seemed to like him. He's been on the radar for South Carolina for quite some time, and they look like they're in a good spot to land an additional 2028 receiver to get off to a really good start in that class.
Yeah, and I'll say, watching this film right now, Chris, the thing that pops to me, if Jet Gibbs is kind of your speedster, your athlete playing receiver, multiple positions, multiple sports, gonna need to develop as a wide receiver, but crazy upside, then I think Jamari Kane is maybe, if you're pairing them up in a class together, it's kind of a little bit of the other side of that yin and yang. This is a kid who, to me, just already appears, especially for a guy with 2 years left, there's some wide receiver skill here, like some wide receiver development. Snatches the football out of the air, looks natural catching the ball, looks natural adjusting and coming back to the ball on like curls and hooks and stuff like that, comeback routes. And so I think these two kind of pair well together if this kicks off South Carolina's receiver class. And I think, asking around a little bit, man, you look at the three guys they brought in this kind of current cycle, this 2027 group, you can almost take them and say, well, this guy in theory, like DJ Huggins in theory, is your slot. You look at Ivion Lewis in theory as one of your outside guys. Javian in theory is one of your other outside guys. And they kind of fit into an offense to where you could say, hey, they could all three play together on the same field. This kind of seems like these two guys pair together well. And as Austin asked, how many more do you take for 28 at wide receiver? I feel like that's one of those questions, man. We used to maybe be able to sort that out. Now, so much can change from one year to the next. Who do you lose? Who comes back? Who develops? Who doesn't? It's very hard to give a number because it can change in the final month of a class, Then you even have this new thing of, what if a guy pops up who like would have been a preferred walk-on in the past? This whole thing called Scully only, basically, which is like you would have been a preferred walk-on, but now we're going to put you on scholarship, but you're not really getting any NIL, and you're an above the 85 type guy. So I don't really get too locked in anymore, and they're going to take 2, they're going to take 3. I don't know if it matters, and I don't know if you can project it at this point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, it's just different now, dude.
It's different, and you all kind of following it the past couple of years. Here with how South Carolina has done it is, it's kind of also been think back to this class. It was they got 2 receivers, and then it was Javian Robinson, DJ Huggins, and then it was like, oh, they might take a third, but it's going to have to be the right guy. And they did. And so if they couldn't have gotten Ivion Lewis, maybe they stand pat with 2 and then, have an extra slot for the portal. Then you've got, you might have more attrition than you banked on in a given year. And then you might decide to use one of those slots on an additional high school guy. So it is tougher to tell, but it would be a heck of a good start for the 2028 class. And Mike Furry continuing to do what Shane Beamer brought him in to do, and that is develop, what did Shane Beamer talk about when he made that change? We need to do a better job of developing young receivers. The way you do that is to bring in young talent. And so when you look at what Furry's done in recruiting, starting with that 2025 class, he's been able to bring in talent each year from the high school ranks.
Yeah. And I mean, dude, that would be 2, obviously, but you still have, Jordan Gorham out there, who started out his career in the state of South Carolina. He's at IMG now. You have Jayton Briles, who is the son of Kendall Briles, who has an offer from South Carolina for that 2028 class. And then, I'm sure they will keep recruiting Braylon Clark, who right now is kind of considered maybe to be a major Ohio State lean if you listen to the national stuff that is out there. Not to mention a 2029 class that I think is loaded in state, including some wide receivers, that either already have offers or are guys to watch there. So I think it's one of those things. If you can get players who really have a shot to help you committed early on like this, and then it just gives you a little bit more flexibility to decide on a case-by-case basis how you want to handle that moving forward versus, feeling like you have to start filling slots and you need numbers and you need bodies and all those things. So, all right, y'all, that's over an hour right there. Chris, I'd like to think we covered a lot of it, covered a lot of ground. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Shout out to our sponsors. As always, y'all, please support those guys. If you are in the market for whatever, business our sponsors are in, all we ask is you just give them a chance to earn your business. Chris, You good, man? You got anything else? Any closing thoughts?
That's
You
it
good?
for me.
Chris is out. He's done. All right, we're both out. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a great one. And if we don't see you before it, y'all have a great weekend. Okay, that's GC Live, and we'll see you soon.